The hung in the air between them like a confession and a challenge all at once, and Mara's hand froze halfway to the fence post she'd been about to repair. She turned slowly, her worn work gloves still clutching the hammer, and stared at the massive man. No, not quite a man, standing at the edge of her property. He was easily 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered and battle-scarred, with eyes that gleamed amber in the fading sunlight. His jaw was set in a hard line, but those eyes held something desperate, something raw that made her chest tighten despite every instinct screaming at her to run. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. "Excuse me?" Mara finally managed, her voice steadier than she felt. She'd seen shifters before. Hell, her ranch bordered pack territory. But none had ever approached her like this. None had ever looked at her with such intense, almost painful focus. "I need your help." His voice was rough, like gravel over silk, and he took a step closer before stopping himself. His massive hands clenched at his sides. "My name is Cale Thornridge. I'm a Lycan warrior from the Northern Territories, and I'm dying." The hammer slipped from her fingers and hit the dirt with a dull thud. "You're… what?" "Battle madness." He said it like a curse, like something shameful. "When warriors like me go too long without connection, without the grounding that intimacy provides, we lose ourselves to our beasts. I've been fighting on the front lines for 18 months. 6 months ago, my last…" He paused, jaw working. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I have maybe 2 weeks before I completely lose control, before I become a threat to everyone around me." Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd heard stories about battle madness, whispered tales from the truck stop in town where shifters sometimes gathered. Warriors who went feral, who couldn't shift back, who became nothing but rage and instinct. "Why are you telling me this?" She forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every cell in her body was hyper-aware of how small she was compared to him, how isolated her ranch was, how completely alone they were. "Because you're human." Something flickered across his face. Vulnerability, maybe, or shame? "And because the old healer in town told me you were kind, that you took in strays, fixed broken things, that you didn't judge. Old Margaret sent you here." Mara's voice rose slightly. "That meddling! She said you'd understand what it's like to be desperate." Cale's amber eyes never left hers. "She said you knew what it meant to need help and have nowhere else to turn." The words hit harder than they should have. Mara thought of the foreclosure notice tucked in her kitchen drawer, the medical bills from her father's final months, the way the bank had looked at her like she was nothing when she'd begged for an extension. Margaret knew. Of course she knew. The old woman knew everything that happened in this town. "I can pay you." Cale's voice dropped lower. "Name your price. I have savings, resources. I just…" He cut himself off, dragging a hand through his dark hair. "I need someone who won't bind me, who won't expect forever. Someone who can give me enough to push back the madness until I can get back to my territory and find a proper solution." "You're asking me to sleep with you." Mara said it flatly, needing to hear the words out loud, needing to make this absurdly surreal situation concrete. "I'm asking you to save my life." His expression was raw, unguarded, in a way that made her breath catch. "And I'm offering to save yours in return. Margaret told me about your situation, the ranch, the dead. I can clear it all. 1 night, maybe 2, and you'd never have to worry about losing your home again." Mara's mind raced. This was insane, completely, utterly insane. She should send him away, should call the sheriff. should do anything but stand here actually considering the proposition of a desperate shifter warrior who'd appeared on her land like something out of a fever dream. But her gaze drifted past him to the ranch house, the peeling paint, the sagging porch, the land that had been in her family for 4 generations and would be auctioned off in 30 days if she couldn't come up with $40,000. Her father's legacy, her mother's memory, everything she'd fought to hold on to after they'd both passed. How much? The words left her mouth before she could stop them. 50,000. Cale didn't hesitate. Transferred immediately, before anything happens, and I give you my word, my warrior's oath, that I will not harm you, will not force anything you don't consent to, and will leave the moment you ask me to. 50,000. Enough to clear the debt and have breathing room for repairs, for feed, for all the things she'd been scraping by without. Mara's hands trembled as she bent to retrieve her hammer, needing something to ground herself. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know." His voice was gentle now, understanding. "But we're both out of options, aren't we?" She looked at him then, really looked, past the intimidating size and the predatory grace, past the scars that marked him as someone who'd seen true violence. His eyes held exhaustion that went bone deep, a weariness that spoke of battles fought not just with enemies, but with himself. "One night," she heard herself say. "Maybe 2. You stay in the guest room. We figure things out, and the money comes first." Agreed. Cale pulled out a phone that looked almost comically small in his massive hand. "Give me your bank information." 20 minutes later, Mara stood in her kitchen, staring at her phone screen with disbelieving eyes. The bank app showed a deposit of $50,000, cleared and available immediately. In the living room, she could hear Kyle moving around, his footsteps heavy but careful, like he was trying not to break anything in her modest home. "I made coffee," she called out, "because what else did you do when a giant Lycan warrior who just paid you to sleep with him was standing in your living room? Do shifters drink coffee?" He appeared in the doorway, having to duck slightly to fit through the frame. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We do, thank you." They sat at her small kitchen table, the chairs creaking under his weight, and an awkward silence settled between them. Mara wrapped her hands around her mug, using the warmth to steady herself. "So," she started, then had to clear her throat. "How does what exactly—" "I don't know." Kyle's honesty surprised her. He stared down into his coffee like it might hold answers. "I've never done this before. Hired someone, I mean. Usually it's—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Usually it's— what?" Mara found herself genuinely curious despite the strangeness of everything. Casual encounters, warriors celebrating a victory, or needing to blow off steam between battles. But I haven't been home in 18 months, haven't had time for anything but fighting. His fingers tightened around the mug. And then, 6 months ago, I realized something was wrong. The beast was getting harder to control. My shifts were more violent. I was angrier, more aggressive. "Why didn't you go home then?" "Because the war wasn't over." His voice turned hard. "Because my unit needed me. Because I'm the best tracker we have, and men would have died without me there." He met her eyes. "But now I'm becoming a liability. Yesterday, I almost shifted during a briefing. Lost time. Came to with my claws out and my commander backing away slowly." Mara absorbed this, trying to understand a world so different from her quiet ranch life. And intimacy fixes this? That seems too simple. It's not about the act itself. KL leaned back in his chair, which groaned in protest. It's about connection, grounding. Lycans are pack creatures. We're not meant to be isolated. Physical intimacy creates bonds, even temporary ones. It reminds the beast that we're more than just predators, that we have something worth controlling ourselves for. And humans work for this? She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Sometimes better than shifters. His expression turned distant. With another shifter, there's always the risk of a mate bond, of complications. With humans, it's cleaner, simpler. The words stung more than they should have. Cleaner, simpler. Like she was a transaction, a tool to be used and set aside. But wasn't that exactly what this was? She'd taken his money. She'd agreed to this arrangement. "I should show you the guest room," Mara said abruptly, standing. "You must be tired." Kael followed her through the house, his presence seeming to fill every space they moved through. The guest room was small and plain, just a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the fields. She'd put fresh sheets on it that morning, back when her biggest worry had been fixing the fence before the cattle wandered onto the highway. "It's not much," she started to apologize. "It's perfect." Kael's voice was soft, almost reverent. "I haven't slept in a real bed in months. Usually it's cots or the ground." He set down the worn pack he'd been carrying. "Thank you, Mara, for taking a chance on a stranger." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and retreated to her own room. Only when the door was closed behind her did she let herself collapse onto the bed, her whole body shaking with the enormity of what she'd just done. That night, sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house made her hyper-aware of Kael's presence just down the hall. She found herself straining to hear him, wondering what a Lycan warrior did in the quiet hours. Did he sleep, pace, struggle with the beast he'd described? Around 2 in the morning, she heard it, a low, pained sound that made her sit bolt upright. It came again, louder this time, and without thinking, she was out of bed and moving down the hall. She knocked softly on his door. "Kael?" The sound stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, "I'm fine. Go back to bed." But his voice was strained, wrong somehow. Mara's hand hovered over the doorknob. This was his business, not hers. She'd done her part by giving him shelter. Whatever he was dealing with was another sound, this one closer to a growl, and her resolve crumbled. She opened the door. Kael was on the floor, his massive frame curled in on itself, shaking. In the moonlight streaming through the window, she could see his skin rippling, fur breaking through in patches before receding. His hands were clawed, digging into the wooden floorboards. "Get out," he gritted between clenched teeth. "Not safe." Instead, Mara moved closer, her heart hammering but her feet steady. She'd grown up around animals, knew that sometimes the most dangerous creatures were just scared and hurting. "Tell me what to do." She knelt beside him, just out of reach. "Tell me how to help." "Can't." His voice was barely human now, more growl than words. "Beast wants, needs." "Touch?" she supplied quietly. "Connection?" His amber eyes snapped to her, wild and desperate. "Don't. Too dangerous. Might hurt." Mara had never been particularly brave. She'd spent most of her life playing it safe, doing the sensible thing. But something about seeing this powerful warrior reduced to struggling on her floor, fighting himself to keep from harming her, made her understand that sometimes courage was just choosing to trust. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. The effect was immediate. Kael gasped, his body going rigid before slowly, incrementally beginning to relax. The fur receded, the claws retracted. His breathing evened out into something closer to normal. "Keep touching me," he whispered hoarsely. "Please, it's helping." So Mara did. She kept her hand on his shoulder, feeling the play of muscle beneath heated skin, the tremors that still ran through him. Gradually, he uncurled, sitting up but staying close to her, like he was afraid to move too far from the point of contact. "I'm sorry," he breathed. "I thought I had more time before it got this bad." "It's okay." And somehow it was. In this quiet moment, with moonlight painting them both silver, the fear had receded into something else. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of trust. "I should." Kael started to pull away, but Mara's hand tightened on his shoulder. Stay. The word came out softer than she intended. If it helps, stay. They sat there on the floor of her guest room, her hand on his shoulder, his breathing gradually steadying. And for the first time since he'd appeared on her property with his impossible confession, Mara felt like maybe they could both survive this strange arrangement they'd made. "Tell me about the war," she said quietly, needing to fill the silence with something other than the warmth, his presence. Cale was quiet for a long moment. Feral packs, shifters who've given in completely to their beasts, who raid and kill without conscience. They've been getting bolder, pushing into populated territories. His voice was bleak. The irony isn't lost on me, that I'm fighting ferals while becoming one myself. You're not feral. Mara said it with certainty she didn't quite understand. Feral things don't fight this hard to stay in control. They don't make desperate bargains to keep from hurting people. He turned to look at her then, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You're kind," he said softly. "Margaret was right about that." "I'm practical." Mara tried to deflect, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "And I needed the money. You could have sent me away, called for help, but you opened your door, and now you're sitting on the floor with a shifting Lycan because you couldn't stand to hear me hurting." His hand came up, slowly, carefully, to cover hers where it still rested on his shoulder. "That's not practical. That's kind." The warmth of his palm over her fingers sent heat racing up her arm. Mara became suddenly, acutely aware of how close they were, how little she was wearing, just an old t-shirt and sleep shorts, how his eyes had dropped to her mouth before returning to hers. "We should probably," she started, but couldn't finish the sentence. "Should probably what? Go to bed? Establish boundaries? Actually discuss the physical intimacy they danced around acknowledging?" "I won't rush you." Kael's voice was low, intimate in the darkness. "Whatever happens between us, whenever it happens, it will be your choice, your pace. Even though you're running out of time? Even then." His thumb stroked over her knuckles, sending shivers through her. "I meant what I said earlier. I won't force anything. The money is yours regardless." It would be so easy to lean in, to close the distance between them. Part of her wanted to, the part that responded to the barely leashed power in him, to the vulnerability he'd shown, to the simple fact that it had been far too long since anyone had looked at her the way he was looking at her now. But another part held back, uncertain and afraid. This wasn't supposed to be real. This was a transaction, a business arrangement to solve both their problems. Getting tangled up in actual feelings would be stupid, dangerous. "I should go back to bed," Mara said, but she didn't move. "You should," Cale agreed, but his hand tightened over hers. They stayed frozen like that, caught between what they should do and what some deeper instinct was pushing them toward. Finally, Mara forced herself to pull away, to stand, to put distance between them. "Good night, Cale." "Good night, Mara." His eyes tracked her as she moved to the door. "And thank you for not running." Back in her own room, Mara pressed her back against the closed door and tried to calm her racing heart. This was only the first night. She had no idea how she was going to survive however many more lay ahead. Morning came too soon and too bright. Mara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, which was wrong because she lived alone and never made bacon because it was too expensive. She stumbled out of bed and into the kitchen to find Cale standing at her stove, cooking breakfast like he belonged there. "I hope you don't mind," he said without turning around. "I needed something to do with my hands, and I figured I should earn my keep." The domestic scene was surreal. This massive warrior, who'd been half-shifted and desperate just hours ago, now stood in her kitchen making breakfast. He'd found her apron hanging on the door and put it on, though it was comically small on his frame. "You cook?" Mara moved to pour herself coffee, needing caffeine before she could process this new development. Learned in the military. When you're in the field, everyone takes turns. He glanced at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Awareness, maybe, as he took in her sleep-mussed hair and bare legs. "How do you like your eggs?" "Scrambled is fine." She sat at the table, cradling her mug. "How are you feeling after last night?" His shoulders tensed slightly. "Better. Your presence helped more than you know." He plated the food and brought it to the table, sitting across from her. "But it's not a permanent solution. The episodes will get worse, more frequent." Mara picked at her bacon, appetite fading. "How much time do we have?" "Days, maybe less." Cale's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you signed up for." "You were honest about what you needed." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I made my choice." They ate in silence for a moment before Cale spoke again. "Tell me about the ranch. How long has it been in your family?" The question surprised her, but she found herself answering. Talking about the ranch was easier than thinking about everything else. She told him about her great-grandfather, who'd first claimed the land, about her parents who'd poured their lives into it, about her father's illness and the medical bills that had slowly bled them dry. "He didn't have insurance?" Cale asked. "Couldn't afford it. And by the time the cancer was diagnosed, it was too late anyway." Mara stared down at her plate. "I tried to keep up with everything after he died. The ranch work, the bills, all of it. But I'm just one person, and there's only so much I can do. Why not sell? Start over somewhere easier?" "Because this is home." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "Because my parents are buried on that hill overlooking the east pasture. Because every tree, every fence post, every damn stone in the creek bed holds memories. You don't just walk away from that." Cale nodded slowly. "I understand that. Loyalty to what came before." His expression turned distant. "My family's been warriors for 12 generations. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to choose a different path. But the weight of all those who came before?" He shook his head. "We are what we're born to be." "Are we?" Mara challenged. "Or is that just what we tell ourselves when we're afraid to try something different?" He smiled then. A real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. "You're braver than you think, rancher," says the man who fights pharaohs for a living. "That's not brave. That's training and instinct." His smile faded. "Brave is what you did last night, walking into a room with a shifting Lycan because you heard him hurting. Brave is rebuilding your life after losing everything. Brave is trusting a stranger with your safety because you're desperate enough to take the risk." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Mara found she couldn't look away from him, couldn't dismiss the sincerity in his amber eyes. "We should get to work," she said finally, needing to break the tension. "Ranch doesn't run itself, and I've got that fence to finish." "I'll help." Cale stood, clearing their plates. "Put me to work." "You don't have to." "I want to." He turned to face her fully. "I need to do something productive, something that doesn't involve violence or survival. Let me help you fix your fence." So they worked. Mara showed him what needed to be done, and Cale followed her instructions with a competence that surprised her. His strength made quick work of tasks that would have taken her hours, but he was careful too, gentle with the tools and materials despite his size. The sun climbed higher as they labored, and Mara found herself relaxing into his presence. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was thoughtful, asking questions about the ranch and her life. She learned that he'd been a warrior since he was 18, that he'd never known anything but military life, that he had a younger sister he hadn't seen in 2 years. "Do you miss her?" Mara asked as they took a break in the shade. "Every day." Cale's voice was rough with emotion. "She writes letters, but it's not the same. I should be there, helping her navigate pack politics, keeping the idiots away from her. Instead, I'm halfway across the territory playing soldier." You're not playing. What you do matters. Does it? He stared out at the horizon. Sometimes I wonder if we're just fighting an unwinnable war, if the ferals will eventually overwhelm us no matter what we do. Mara didn't have an answer for that, so she just sat with him in the quiet, their shoulders almost touching. The afternoon stretched long and peaceful, broken only by the sounds of their work and the occasional call of cattle in the distance. It was near evening when the truck appeared, kicking up dust as it barreled down her drive. Mara straightened, a familiar dread settling in her stomach as she recognized the vehicle. "That's Dale Hutchins," she said quietly, "local banker. He probably heard about the deposit, came to collect." Cale moved closer to her, his presence suddenly protective. "Want me to handle him?" "No, I've got this." But she appreciated the offer more than she could say. Dale climbed out of his truck, his expression smug and predatory. He was a big man who'd used his size to intimidate people his whole life, always with a cruel edge to his smile. His eyes swept over Cale with naked assessment before dismissing him and focusing on Mara. "Well now, Mara Reed, heard you came into some money." He hooked his thumbs in his belt loops, his stance aggressive. "Thought I'd come by and discuss how you'd like to settle up with the bank." "I'll be in Monday with a cashier's check." Mara kept her voice level. "Everything will be paid in full." "That's so." Dale's smile widened. "Funny thing is, I'm curious where a struggling rancher gets $50,000 overnight. You come into an inheritance I don't know about?" "That's none of your business." "Actually, it is my business. Banks got a right to know the source of funds, make sure everything's legitimate." His eyes slid to Cale again, lingering with unmistakable insinuation. "Unless you're engaging in activities of an unsavory nature." Cale moved then, faster than Mara could track, putting himself between her and Dale. His voice was soft, conversational, but carried an undercurrent of barely restrained violence. "I suggest you be very careful with your next words." Dale took a step back, some primal instinct warning him he'd stumbled into dangerous territory. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate you insulting my hostess." Cale's eyes had gone amber, glowing slightly in the fading light. "The lady said she'd pay you Monday. I suggest you leave now, before you say something you'll regret." For a moment, Dale looked like he might push back. Then his eyes widened as he caught sight of something. The subtle shift in Cale's features, maybe, or the predatory stillness that marked him as other. Whatever he saw made him blanch and stumble backward. "Monday," he muttered, practically running back to his truck. "First thing Monday." They watched the vehicle disappear in a cloud of dust. When Mara finally turned to Cale, she found him still tense, his hands clenched into fists. "Thank you," she said softly. "He's been like that for years, ever since I turned him down for a date in high school. He's a predator." Cale's voice was flat, emotionless, and not the good kind, the kind that uses power to hurt people weaker than himself. "Welcome to small-town life." Mara tried for levity, but her hands were shaking. The confrontation had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. Cale noticed. He always noticed. His expression softened as he reached out, gently taking one of her trembling hands in his. "You handled that well. Most people would have backed down. What choice did I have?" She looked up at him, suddenly exhausted. "This is my home. If I don't fight for it, who will?" Something passed over his face then, respect, admiration, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. His thumb stroked over her palm, the touch sending warmth spreading through her chest. "We should go inside," Cale said, but he didn't let go of her hand. "It's getting dark." They walked back to the house together, hands linked, and Mara realized with a start that it felt natural, comfortable. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before, instead of just meeting yesterday. Dinner was leftovers heated up quickly, both of them too tired for anything elaborate. They ate at the small table again, the familiarity of it settling something in Mara's chest. It felt domestic, normal, like this was just another evening in a life they'd been building together for years. "I need to ask you something," Kyle said as they cleared the dishes, "and I need you to be honest with me." Mara's stomach tightened with anxiety. "Okay. Are you afraid of me?" The question surprised her. She turned to face him fully, considering her answer carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted, "when I think about what you could do if you lost control, but mostly, no, I'm not afraid of you, Kyle." "Why not?" He moved closer, his amber eyes intense. "You should be. I'm dangerous, unstable. I could hurt you without meaning to." "But you won't." Mara held his gaze. "Because you're fighting every second to stay in control. Because you made me a promise, and I believe you'll keep it." His hand came up to cup her face. The touch, gentle, displayed his strength. "You have too much faith in me." "Maybe you don't have enough faith in yourself." She leaned into his palm without thinking, seeking the warmth and comfort of contact. Kyle's breath caught. His thumb traced her cheekbone, his expression torn between restraint and want. "Mara." "I know." She did know, knew they were standing on the edge of something that would change everything. "I'm not ready yet, but I'm getting there." "Take all the time you need." His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "I meant what I said. Your choice, your pace." But even as he said it, Mara could see the tension in his frame, the tremors that ran through him. He was getting worse, the beast pushing harder. They didn't have the luxury of time, and they both knew it. That night, she lay in her bed and listened to the sounds from down the hall, the pacing, the barely audible growls, the creaks of the floor as Kyle fought his nature. Around midnight, she heard him leave the house, his footsteps heavy on the porch. She rose and went to the window, watching as his massive form crossed the yard and disappeared into the tree line. She should let him go, should let him handle this alone. Instead, she pulled on jeans and boots and followed. She found him in the clearing by the creek, stripped to the waist and breathing hard. In the moonlight, she could see the partial shift. Claws extended, muscle and bone rippling under his skin, fur sprouting and receding in waves. He was on his knees, head thrown back, clearly in agony. "Kyle." She approached slowly, making sure he heard her coming. "Let me help." "No." His voice was more growl than word. "Too dangerous. Go back." Instead, she knelt in front of him, reaching out to place both hands on his shoulders. His skin was burning hot, trembling under her touch. "Look at me," she commanded softly. His eyes snapped open, amber and wild, not quite human. But he focused on her, really saw her, and something in that primal gaze steadied. "Breathe with me," Mara instructed, keeping her voice low and calm. "In and out. Feel my hands on you. Focus on that." Slowly, painfully, Kyle's breathing began to match hers. The shift reversed, inch by agonizing inch. His claws retracted, his features returning to human. But the effort cost him. When it was done, he collapsed forward, caught himself on his hands, shaking with exhaustion. "I can't keep doing this," he gasped. "It's getting worse, harder to come back each time." Mara knew what he wasn't saying, that they'd run out of time, that talk and good intentions weren't enough anymore. The beast needed more than just her presence. It needed the deeper connection, the intimacy they'd been dancing around. "Come back to the house," she said quietly. He let her help him up, let her guide him back through the darkness. In the guest room, she sat him on the edge of the bed and knelt to remove his boots. It was intimate, caring for him like this, but it felt right, natural. "Mara, I can," he started, but she shook her head. "Let me." She pulled off the second boot, then rose to stand between his knees. His hands came to rest on her hips, light and tentative. "I'm not ready for everything, but I can give you this much. Touch, connection, whatever you need to get through tonight. You don't have to." But his hands tightened on her hips, contradicting his words. "I know." She cupped his face in her hands, tilting his head up to meet her eyes. "But I want to. Is that enough? Just this?" "Yes." The word was fervent, grateful. "God, yes. Just having you close, being able to touch you. It's more than I expected, more than I deserve." Mara kicked off her boots and climbed onto the bed, settling with her back against the headboard. She held out her arms in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Cale moved to join her, his large frame curling around hers as his head came to rest on her chest. She wrapped her arms around him, one hand stroking through his dark hair, the other tracing patterns on his broad back. The effect was immediate. The tension drained from his body, his breathing evening out. She felt him relax against her, no longer fighting, no longer straining for control. "Thank you," he murmured against her collarbone. "Thank you for trusting me." They stayed like that, wrapped around each other in the darkness. Mara felt his heartbeat slow and steady against her side, felt the warmth of his breath on her skin. It should have been awkward, uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Tell me about your sister," she said quietly, needing to fill the silence with something other than her racing thoughts. Cale was quiet for a moment. "Her name is Lyra. She's 22, full of fire and stubbornness, wants to be a healer instead of a warrior, which drives our father crazy." Fondness softened his voice. "She's the best of us, really. Sees the good in everyone, believes we can find peaceful solutions to conflicts. Everything I'm not." "I doubt that's true." "It is." His arm tightened around her waist. "I'm a weapon, Mara. It's all I've ever been trained to be. Point me at a problem, and I solve it with violence. Lyra actually tries to understand, to heal. She's what the packs need right now, not more warriors like me." "The packs need both," Mara said firmly. "Warriors to protect them, and healers to help them recover. One can't exist without the other." Cale shifted slightly, tilting his head to look up at her. "You're very wise for a struggling rancher. And you're very self-deprecating for a legendary warrior." She traced the line of his jaw with her fingers. "Margaret called you that when she sent you to me. Said you were one of the best trackers in the territories, that you'd saved countless lives." "Margaret talks too much." "Margaret sees clearly." Mara's hand moved to cup his cheek. "Why can't you see what everyone else does?" "Because I know what I am inside." His voice went rough. "The violence, the rage, the beast that wants blood and doesn't care who gets hurt. You saw it tonight. I was barely in control." "But you didn't lose control. Even at your worst, you held on." She made him meet her eyes. "That's not weakness, Cale. That's strength." He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, slowly, carefully, he rose up to press his forehead against hers. "How did I get this lucky, to find you in my darkest moment?" "We found each other," Mara whispered. "Two desperate people with nothing left to lose." His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin there. The touch sent shivers down her spine, warmth pooling in her belly. When Kael's lips brushed against hers, soft, questioning, she didn't pull away. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent. He moved against her mouth like she was something precious, something that might break if handled too roughly. Mara melted into it, her hands sliding into his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael's eyes had gone amber again. But this time it wasn't from madness or loss of control, it was want, pure and simple. "We should stop," he said, even as his hand slid under the hem of her shirt to splay across the bare skin of her back. "We should," Mara agreed, but she was already pulling him back down for another kiss. This one was deeper, more urgent. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, and she opened for him, tasting coffee and something wild, something uniquely him. His hands roamed her back, her sides, always careful, always giving her room to pull away if she wanted. But she didn't want to. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Mara felt alive, wanted, like she was more than just a struggling rancher at the end of her rope. Cale touched her like she was a miracle, kissed her like she held the answers to all his prayers. When his hand moved to the button of her jeans, she caught his wrist. They both froze, panting. "Not yet," she breathed. Give me a little more time." Of course. Cale pressed a kiss to her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. "Anything you need, always." They settled back into their previous position, Mara's heart still racing, but her body relaxed against his. Cale's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing, and they lay together in the darkness as sleep finally claimed them both. Morning came with unexpected warmth. Mara woke to find herself thoroughly tangled with Kyle, his arm around her waist, her head on his chest, their legs intertwined. She should move, should establish some boundaries. Instead, she stayed where she was, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You're awake," Kyle murmured without opening his eyes. "How did you know?" "Your breathing changed." His hand stroked lazily up and down her spine, "and your heart rate picked up. Perceptive. Tracker, remember?" His eyes opened, amber but clear and focused. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in months." The admission surprised her with its honesty. "You? Best sleep I've had in years." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you. For last night, for staying, for all of it." They lay there a while longer, neither wanting to break the spell. Finally, Mara's practical nature won out. "We should get up. I've got work to do." "Let me help." Kyle sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist. "What needs doing today?" They fell into an easy rhythm over the following hours. Kyle proved himself useful around the ranch, tackling tasks that would have taken Mara days in mere hours with his strength. But more than that, he was good company, asking questions, sharing stories from his time as a warrior, making her laugh with dry observations about pack politics. It was almost noon when the second truck appeared, this one newer and bearing official pack insignia. Mara's stomach dropped as three men climbed out, all large, all clearly warriors, all wearing expressions that ranged from concerned to hostile. Kyle tensed beside her, going very still in the way predators do before they strike. "Stay behind me." The lead warrior, older, with silver streaking his dark hair, approached slowly. "Kyle Thornridge, we've been looking for you." "Commander Blaine." Kyle's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm on personal leave." "You went AWOL." Blaine's expression was stern but not unsympathetic. "Left your unit without permission, without explanation. Your commanding officer is threatening a court-martial." "I sent notification of my condition to medical 3 weeks ago." Cale's jaw tightened. "Requested leave for battle madness treatment. Was denied because we're short-staffed." "Battle madness?" Blaine's eyes sharpened, taking in Cale's appearance with new understanding. Then his gaze moved to Mara, assessing. "And you found treatment here?" "She's helping me manage it until I can get home to proper healers." Cale shifted, blocking Blaine's view of Mara more completely. "I'm handling the situation." "Are you?" One of the younger warriors stepped forward, his expression skeptical. "Because you look like hell, Thornridge. You look like a warrior who's about 3 days from going feral." Cale's growl was low and warning. "Careful, Jensen. He's right, though." Blaine held up a hand before the situation could escalate. "You need to come back with us. We have healers, proper facilities. Whatever arrangement you've made here." He glanced at Mara again, and she didn't miss the disapproval in his eyes. "It's not enough. No." The word was flat, absolute. "I'm not leaving, not yet." "This isn't a request, warrior." Blaine's voice hardened. "You're a danger to yourself and civilians. We're bringing you in." The tension ratcheted up another notch. The other warriors moved to flank, their postures aggressive. Kale's hand found Mara, pulling her even closer to his side. "I gave her my word I'd stay until the arrangement was fulfilled." Kale's eyes flashed amber. "I'm not breaking that." "Arrangement?" Jensen's lip curled. "You mean you paid for—" "Finish that sentence and lose your tongue." Kale snarled. Mara had stayed quiet through all of this, letting Kale handle his pack business. But enough was enough. She stepped around him, ignoring his attempt to pull her back, and faced Blaine directly. "He has 4 more days." She kept her voice level despite her racing heart. 4 days that he's paid for, and that he needs. Then hell return with you to your healers and face whatever consequences you think are warranted. But until then, he's my guest and under my protection." The warriors stared at her like she'd grown a second head. A human woman standing up to pack warriors, demanding they respect an arrangement with a warrior showing signs of battle madness? It was insane by any measure. Blaine's expression shifted from surprise to something that might have been respect. "You understand what you're asking? What could happen if he loses control?" "I understand perfectly." Mara lifted her chin. "And my answer stands. 4 more days." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Blaine nodded slowly. 4 days. But we'll be monitoring the situation. Any sign that he's a danger to you or others, we're extracting him immediately." "Fair enough." The warriors retreated to their truck, though not before Jensen shot Kale a look that promised they'd be having words later. As the vehicle pulled away, Mara felt her knees start to shake with reaction to what she'd just done. Kale turned her to face him, his hands gripping her shoulders. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." "Probably both." She managed a shaky laugh. "Did I really just threaten pack warriors?" "You did." His expression was odd, almost reverent. "You stood between me and my commander? Do you have any idea what that means? That I'm insane? That you claimed me." His hand slid from her shoulders to cup her face. "In front of witnesses. You declared me under your protection, which in pack law is as good as claiming me as yours." Mara's heart stuttered. I wasn't thinking about pack law. I was just trying to keep them from taking you." "Why?" His amber eyes bored into hers. "Why fight for me like that?" She wanted to say it was about the money, about fulfilling their arrangement, wanted to maintain the fiction that this was all still just a transaction. But looking up at him, seeing the raw vulnerability in his expression, she couldn't lie. "Because you've become important to me," she admitted quietly. "Because the thought of them dragging you away, of you facing some court-martial or being locked up while you're suffering, makes me want to fight anyone who tries." She laughed shakily. "I know that's stupid. We barely know each other. But—" He kissed her then, cutting off her rambling words with lips and tongue and teeth. It was desperate, grateful, claiming. His hands tangled in her hair as he backed her against the side of the house, his larger body bracketing hers. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Kyle pressed his forehead to hers. 4 days, he breathed. "We have 4 days before they come back, before I have to leave." The words hung between them, an acknowledgement of what they'd both been avoiding. This thing between them had an expiration date. In 4 days, Kyle would return to his pack, to his war, to his life. And Mara would stay here on her ranch, alone again. "Then let's not waste them," she said, pulling him down for another kiss. They made it inside somehow, lips locked, hands roaming. Kyle lifted her like she weighed nothing, carrying her through the house and setting her gently on the edge of the kitchen counter. He stepped between her legs, his hands sliding up her thighs as he kissed down her neck. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her skin. "Tell me this is too fast, and I'll stop." "Don't stop." Mara's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel skin against skin. "Please don't stop." His shirt hit the floor, followed quickly by her own. Kyle's hands were everywhere, memorizing the curve of her waist, the soft skin of her inner thighs, the weight of her breasts through the thin fabric of her bra. When his thumb brushed over her nipple, she gasped and arched into him. "Beautiful," he breathed, his eyes tracking every inch of exposed skin. "You're so damn beautiful." No one had ever looked at her like this, like she was something precious and wild all at once, like she was worth the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred things. It made her bold, made her reach for his belt buckle with trembling fingers. "Bedroom," Cale managed, even as his hips rocked forward into her touch. "Bedroom." He carried her there, still kissing her, still touching every inch of skin he could reach. They fell onto her bed together, a tangle of limbs and desperate hands. Clothes disappeared piece by piece, until there was nothing between them but heat and want, and the thundering of their hearts. "Last chance," Cale said, even as his hands slid between her thighs, fingers finding wetness and heat. "Last chance to tell me no." "Yes," Mara gasped, her back arching. "God, yes! Please, Cale." He took his time with her, drawing out her pleasure until she was shaking and begging. His mouth and hands worshipped every inch of her body, finding sensitive spots she hadn't known existed. When he finally slid into her, filling her completely, they both groaned at the perfection of it. They moved together, finding a rhythm that was both urgent and tender. Cale's amber eyes never left hers, even as his control frayed at the edges. She could feel him holding back, being careful despite the beast pushing him to claim, to mark, to take. "Let go," she whispered, her hands on his face. "I trust you. Let go." Something shifted in his expression, gratitude and relief and want all mixed together. His pace increased, his hips driving harder, and Mara met him thrust for thrust. The pleasure built and built until she shattered, crying out his name as waves of sensation crashed over her. Cale followed moments later, his roar echoing through the house as he buried himself deep and let go completely. For long moments they stayed locked together, both shaking, both gasping for air. When he finally moved, it was to carefully withdraw and roll them so Mara was draped across his chest. His arms came around her, holding her close as their breathing slowly returned to normal. "Thank you," he said quietly, his hand stroking down her spine. "Not just for this, for everything, for seeing past the beast to the man underneath." Mara propped herself up on his chest, looking down at him. "The beast is part of you too. It doesn't scare me anymore." "It should," but he said it without heat, his expression soft as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're going to spoil me for everyone else, you know that. After this, after you, how am I supposed to go back to empty encounters that mean nothing?" The words sent a pang through her chest. Because he was right. This had stopped being empty the moment she'd walked into his room that first night. Maybe even before that, if she was honest with herself. "Let's not think about after," she said, even though she knew they'd have to eventually. "We have 4 days. Let's just be present for them." 4 days. Kyle pulled her down for a slow, deep kiss. "Then I'll make them count." They spent the rest of the day tangled together, learning each other's bodies and telling each other stories. Kyle talked about growing up in a warrior family, about the pressure and expectations, about the younger sister he worried about constantly. Mara shared memories of her parents, of learning to ranch from her father, of the quiet satisfaction that came from working the land. As evening fell, they made dinner together, a simple meal, but it felt significant somehow, like they were building something, creating a space that belonged to both of them, even though they both knew it was temporary. That night, Kyle shifted for her, not a full transformation, but enough to show her his wolf form. He was massive, dark-furred and powerful, with those same amber eyes that saw too much. Mara reached out slowly, letting him sniff her hand before she sank her fingers into his thick fur. "You're beautiful like this too," she whispered, and felt a rumble of contentment vibrate through his chest. They slept tangled together again, skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. And in the morning, Kyle was calmer than he'd been since arriving, the connection they'd forged holding the beast at bay more effectively than anything else had managed. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and intimacy, of long talks and comfortable silences. They fell into a routine that felt right, waking together, working the ranch during the day, making love at night. Kyle showed no more signs of battle madness, his shifts controlled and peaceful. But always, in the back of both their minds, was the knowledge that time was running out. On the 4th morning, Mara woke to find Kyle already up, standing at the window and staring out at the dawn. She went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "They'll be here today," he said quietly. "I know." She pressed her face against his back, breathing in his scent. "Are you ready?" "No." He turned in her arms, pulling her close. "I don't want to leave. I don't want to go back to the war, to the violence, to being just a weapon. I want to stay here with you, help you run this ranch, build something that isn't about fighting." The words made her chest ache. "You can't. You have obligations, a war to finish." "I know." His voice was bleak. "But that doesn't change what I want." They stood there holding each other as the sun rose, neither wanting to be the first to let go. Finally, the sound of approaching vehicles broke the spell. Commander Blaine had returned, along with a transport vehicle and medical team. Kyle dressed in his warrior gear, leather and tactical clothing that transformed him from the gentle man she'd come to know back into the soldier he'd been trained to be. "I'll fulfill my contract," he told Blaine. "2 more months to finish out my deployment. Then I'm done. I'm coming home." "Understood." Blaine nodded, then turned to Mara. "Thank you for helping him when we couldn't, for giving him a reason to hold on." Mara could only nod, afraid that if she spoke, she'd break down completely. Kale took her hands in his, amber eyes intense. "I'll write. I'll call when I can. And when my deployment is done, I'm coming back here, if you'll have me." "Of course I will." The words came out choked. "But you don't have to. You don't owe me." "This isn't about owing." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away the tear that had escaped. "This is about choosing. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want instead of what's expected of me. And I choose you, Mara Reed. I choose this life, this ranch, this chance at something real." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, in front of his commander and the medical team and everyone. A public declaration that meant everything in pack law. When he finally pulled away, he pressed something into her hand, a medallion on a leather cord. "This is my pack sigil. It marks you as mine, under my protection. Anyone who knows what it means will know you're not to be touched, not to be threatened." "Kale!" "Wear it." His expression was fierce. "Please, let me know you're safe while I'm gone." She clasped it around her neck, the metal warm from his skin. 2 months. 2 months, he agreed. "I'll count every day." Watching him drive away was one of the hardest things Mara had ever done.
She stood in the yard long after the vehicles had disappeared. One hand pressed to the medallion at her throat. The ranch felt too quiet without him, too empty. But she had work to do, debts to officially clear, repairs to make, a life to rebuild. And now, for the first time, she had hope that she wouldn't have to do it alone. 2 months later, the sound of a truck coming up the drive made Mara's heart leap.
She told herself not to get excited. It could be anyone. But then she saw the familiar massive frame climbing out, and she was running before she could think better of it. Cale caught her easily, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. He looked different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The battle hardness in his eyes had softened.